When I stand before you, I do not speak to you merely as a psychologist dissecting the structures of the mind. I speak as one who has gazed long into the abyss of the human soul, who has seen the battle of opposites rage within every man and woman, who has tasted the bitterness of shadow and the light of revelation. You who call yourselves empaths, you who carry the sorrows of others as though they were your own, listen with care, for what I am about to tell you is not a gentle reassurance, but a final warning, born of my deepest understanding of the psyche's labyrinth. For too long, you have mistaken your gift of feeling as a curse, and you have allowed it to draw you into the snares of those who feed upon your light. But the one who heals, the empath who dares to confront their own darkness, becomes something so formidable that the narcissist, the devourer of souls, trembles before them. The empath is not born only from tenderness. Often they are shaped in the crucible of early wounds. They learn to attune themselves to the shifting moods of others because their survival once depended on it. The infant who cries and is not heard, the child who grows up in the storm of a parent's volatility, learns to scan every movement, every subtle tremor in the room, until their own sense of self dissolves into the needs and expectations of those around them. Empathy, then, is not merely a virtue, it is also a scar, a remnant of adaptation to suffering. And so the empath moves into the world carrying an invisible burden, one that draws them like iron filings to the magnetic field of the narcissist, who seeks endlessly for mirrors in which to adore their own reflection. But the healing empath is no longer that child. The healing empath has stepped into the underworld of their psyche, where the ancestral symbols of shadow, anima, animus, and self burn with archetypal fire. The healing empath has seen their own rage, their own hunger for validation, their own capacity for manipulation. They no longer pretend to be pure light. They have made the descent, and in the descent they have discovered the hidden strength that comes when one embraces the whole of the psyche. And it is here that the narcissist finds themselves facing an enemy they cannot control, for the narcissist thrives only when others remain unconscious of their own wounds. The narcissist fears not the empath who bleeds for them, who bends under their exploitation. The narcissist fears the empath who has gathered their fragments, who has made peace with their darkness, who no longer needs to rescue or to be rescued. Such an empath no longer radiates the desperate availability that once made them prey. They radiate instead the quiet sovereignty of one who has integrated shadow and light, one who embodies the self. This is not a sentimental love, but a fierce, discriminating love, one that can say yes with power and no with equal power. This, I tell you, is the moment when the narcissist trembles, for they can no longer penetrate the fortress of an integrated soul. You must understand that every archetype carries both shadow and light. The healer, the wounded healer, is no exception. If the empath refuses to heal, if they continue to define themselves by their ability to absorb the pain of others, then the archetype turns against them. They become trapped in a cycle of martyrdom, endlessly sacrificing secretly feeding their own need to be needed. The unconscious bargain is this: I will suffer if only I can be loved. But such love never arrives. The narcissist feeds, the empath empties, and both remain bound in the dance of shadow. This is why healing is not optional. It is the only path to freedom, the only path to power. Consider the dream of a woman who comes to me burdened by the weight of endless toxic relationships. She dreams she is in a vast cathedral filled with broken mirrors. She walks among them, cutting her hands as she tries to pick up the shards. In every fragment she sees the face of a man who once promised her love but gave her only silence or cruelty. She bleeds and bleeds, trying to hold together the shattered reflections. Then a voice calls from above. The mirrors are not yours to repair. She looks up and sees a great figure cloaked in both shadow and light, who gestures to a single, unbroken mirror at the altar. When she gazes into it, she sees not the faces of her lovers, but her own. This dream, I told her, is the drama of the empath. You must stop trying to assemble others' broken images. You must behold your own wholeness. Only then can you walk free of the endless cathedral of shattered illusions. And so I warn you, the empath who refuses to heal will forever be chained to the narcissist's hunger. But the empath who heals will become the very thing the narcissist dreads: a mirror that does not bend, a presence that does not yield, a soul that cannot be consumed. For the narcissist survives only in the unconsciousness of others when confronted with someone who sees with clarity, who names the shadow without fear, who does not flinch when manipulation arises. The narcissist is stripped of power. It is as though the vampire has been caught in the sunlight, and in that light they reveal their own emptiness, their own hunger, their own unhealed wound. Yet this warning is also a call. It is not enough to say you are empathic, to wear your sensitivity like a badge. Sensitivity without consciousness is enslavement. But sensitivity united with consciousness becomes the highest form of power. It is the power of knowing, of perceiving the subtleties of the soul without being overwhelmed by them. It is the ability to walk into a room and feel its atmosphere, yet not be dominated by it. It is the capacity to love fiercely without dissolving into another's chaos. This is not the sentimental empath of common imagination. This is the archetypal healer, the shaman who has walked through the underworld and returned with vision. You see, every empath must eventually ask themselves, am I healing others to avoid healing myself? Am I offering compassion to mask my fear of confrontation? Am I merging with the wounds of others because I am afraid to face my own? These questions are not comfortable. They tear at the illusions of goodness and selflessness, but they are necessary if you are to awaken. For the narcissist's greatest weapon is not their cruelty, but your unconsciousness. The moment you become conscious of your own hidden motives, their power collapses. They no longer have the hook to pull you, because the hook has been burned away in the fire of self-awareness. I have seen this again and again in my patients. The empath who begins their journey broken, exhausted, entangled in the web of narcissists. emerges after deep inner work with a presence that is unmistakable. They no longer apologize for existing. They no longer explain themselves endlessly. They no longer absorb the storms of others. They listen, yes. They feel, yes. But they choose, they discern. They know that love is not sacrifice without end, but the alignment of two whole beings, and this terrifies the narcissist, for it is a power they cannot dominate, a love they cannot exploit. Think of the archetype of the alchemist. The alchemist takes base, matter, lead, poison, suffering, and through fire and transformation creates gold. This is the task of the empath who heals. They take the raw wound of childhood, the poison of exploitation, the chaos of projection, and they transmute it into wisdom, into compassion that does not enslave but liberates. This gold cannot be stolen. It radiates from within, and the narcissist, who thrives only by consuming the energy of others, finds themselves powerless in the presence of such gold. They may rage, they may attempt to seduce, they may retreat into shadows, but they cannot conquer, for what has been made whole is untouchable. I tell you this not to flatter you, but to awaken you. There is no romance in endless suffering. There is no virtue in allowing yourself to be destroyed. True empathy is not the willingness to bleed endlessly for the sake of another's wound. True empathy is the courage to face your own wound, to integrate your shadow, to stand in your full humanity. Then, and only then, does your gift become something sacred. Then your presence becomes a force of healing that needs no exploitation, and then you become the narcissist's greatest fear, a soul they cannot control, a mirror they cannot distort, a being who walks in the full power of consciousness. So I warn you, empaths, heal or be consumed, confront your shadow or be chained to the shadows of others, gather your fragments or spend your life gathering the fragments of those who will never thank you. Choose wholeness and you will become untouchable. And remember this, the path of individuation is not the path of comfort, but the path of liberation. Only when you embrace your own depths will you discover the strength to stand before the narcissist and say, you have no power here. And in that moment, you will know the truth of what I speak. The empath who heals becomes the archetype of the self, radiant, unassailable, and utterly free. When you begin to walk this path of awakening, you will find that your greatest adversary is not the narcissist, but the part of yourself that still longs to return to the old familiar wound. The psyche clings to its patterns as a drowning man clings to driftwood, even if that wood is rotten and leads him nowhere. You will hear the whisper of the shadow within, better to be consumed than to be alone. Better to give away my essence than to face the void of my own emptiness. This is the trick of the unconscious. It will convince you that your destruction is safer than your individuation, because individuation demands that you walk into the fire without guarantee of what remains. But I tell you, the fire only burns away illusion. What emerges is not destruction. but essence. You must recognize the seduction of the savior complex. Many empaths, unhealed, become addicted to saving others. They confuse healing with control, compassion with possession. They step into relationships not as equals, but as secret missionaries, convinced that if they give enough, suffer enough, tolerate enough, then they will finally transform the wounded other into a lover, a friend, a parent they always needed. This is not healing. This is shadow dressed as virtue, and the narcissist recognizes this hunger instantly, for it mirrors their own. The narcissist longs to be adored without end. The wounded empath longs to adore without end. Together they form a closed circuit of despair, each feeding the other's unconsciousness. To awaken is to break this circuit. The dream world often reveals what waking life hides. I recall a dream from a man who had spent years giving himself to a cruel partner, convinced that his sacrifice would one day soften her heart. In his dream, he is in a dark forest, and he sees a magnificent wolf caught in a trap. He approaches to free the animal, but as he draws near, the wolf turns and bites his hand to the bone. Terrified, he flees, bleeding, only to find more wolves circling him. He awakens shaken, not understanding. I told him, the wolf is not your partner. The wolf is your instinct. You have tried to suppress it, to tame it, to bend it to your moral vision. But instinct cannot be tamed through sacrifice. If you deny its voice, it turns against you. You must integrate the wolf, walk with it, honor it, rather than trying to redeem what does not want redemption. The narcissist is like that wolf, hungry, primal, untamed, but unlike the wolf of nature, the narcissist's hunger is endless. And if you seek to rescue them from their own abyss, they will bite until your spirit is gone. Healing demands that you reclaim your instinct. Empathy without instinct is weakness. Empathy with instinct is power. To feel deeply is a gift. To discern when to step back is wisdom. Without that union, you will forever be prey. The narcissist smells the lack of instinct like a predator smells fear. But when you carry both heart and instinct, when your empathy is not sentimentality but vision, then you become untouchable. The archetype of the warrior joins with the archetype of the healer, and the narcissist sees not a lamb to consume, but a lion that cannot be subdued. Do not mistake what I say for a call to hatred. Hatred is simply another form of entanglement. If you hate the narcissist, you remain bound to them. Your energy is still locked in their orbit. The true liberation comes not from hatred, but from indifference, born of clarity. You see them, you understand them, you no longer fear them, and so you are free. The narcissist thrives on being at the center of your psychic universe. When you step out of that orbit, when your life no longer revolves around their approval or rejection, their power dissolves, they rage, they accuse, they weep, they seduce, but you remain unmoved. Not because you are cold, but because you are whole. The empath who heals understands that boundaries are not walls but expressions of essence. A tree does not apologize for its bark. It does not explain to the wind why it must remain rooted. It simply is. Likewise, your no must become as natural as your yes. This is what terrifies the narcissist. A no that cannot be manipulated. A no that does not explain. A no that is rooted in the ground of the self. In the presence of such a no, the narcissist feels the collapse of their entire strategy, for manipulation requires pliability. When there is none, they are left with a mirror of their own emptiness, and it is precisely this emptiness they most fear facing. There is an archetype that haunts both the empath and the narcissist, the archetype of the devouring mother. In myth, she is the figure who feeds endlessly yet never nourishes, who gives only to keep the child dependent, who suffocates under the guise of love. The narcissist often embodies this archetype unconsciously, drawing others into endless dependence, consuming their vitality in exchange for false security. But the wounded empath also risks becoming a reflection of this figure, feeding others endlessly to keep them close, confusing need with love. When you awaken to this archetype, you see the danger of both extremes. True love does not devour, and true empathy does not enslave. It liberates. To heal is to free yourself from the devouring mother, within and without, to step into the archetype of the self that gives without clinging, that loves without fear. The journey of individuation always passes through loneliness. This is why many empaths fear healing, for healing requires the courage to step away from the familiar chains of toxic intimacy. When you withdraw your energy from the narcissist, when you refuse to play the game, you will feel the desert of silence. At first it seems unbearable, for you have lived so long with chaos that silence feels like death. But if you endure, if you allow the silence to speak, you will discover it is not death but gestation. In the silence, your own voice emerges. In the stillness, the self begins to radiate, and when that happens, you will no longer seek the storm of another's need to define your worth. You will carry your worth within you, as steady as the sun that shines. Whether anyone notices or not, this is the paradox. The empath who heals no longer fears loneliness, and because they no longer fear it, they are never truly alone. They carry within them the communion of all archetypes, the wholeness of psyche and spirit. And it is this that the narcissist fears most, for the narcissist lives in perpetual exile from the self. They cannot bear the solitude of their own emptiness. They need endless mirrors to avoid it. But when they face one who no longer fears solitude, one who has found peace in the self, they are confronted with the truth of their own exile. It is unbearable to them, and so they flee, or they collapse, or they rage, but they cannot dominate. I recall the story of a dream from another patient, a man who had lived his entire life serving others, never daring to claim his own desires. He dreamed he was standing before a massive door, carved with ancient symbols. Behind it, he knew, was a vast treasure, but a figure blocked the way, a towering man with no face, who demanded he kneel if he wished to pass. Terrified, he almost surrendered until something rose in him. He stood tall and said, "I will not kneel. The treasure is mine by right." In that instant, the faceless man dissolved into smoke, and the door opened. Inside was not gold, but a blazing sun that filled him with light. I told him, "This is your healing." The faceless man is the narcissist, the internalized figure who demands submission. The treasure is yourself. When you refuse to kneel, when you claim your right to exist, the door opens and no one can take that light from you again. This, then, is the final warning. If you do not heal, you will kneel forever at doors that never open, bleeding for those who cannot love, chained to the endless hunger of others. But if you heal, you will stand, you will claim, you will walk through the door into your own radiance. And in that radiance, the narcissist has no dominion. They become small, irrelevant, shadows passing in the light of your sun. Do not underestimate the power of this transformation, for the world is filled with those who live as prey, unaware of their strength. But you, if you choose, can embody the archetype that turns the tide. You can become the empath who heals, who stands as a mirror of wholeness, who cannot be consumed. And this, I tell you, is the narcissist's greatest fear. When we speak of healing, we are not speaking of a superficial comfort or a polite adjustment to outer life. We are speaking of a profound alchemical process, a descent into the unconscious, where the gods of dream and shadow dwell, where the archetypes stir in their eternal patterns. To heal is to confront what has been hidden, to draw up what has been repressed, to integrate what has been denied. And for the empath, this means to confront the shadow of their own empathy. It is here, in this confrontation, that the path becomes most dangerous, for what you have called your virtue may also be your prison, and what you have feared in yourself may be the very key to liberation. The shadow of the empath is not cruelty, as many assume. It is need. It is the desperate hunger to be loved, masked as selflessness. It is the secret pride of being indispensable, of being the one who understands, the one who carries, the one who heals. This is why empaths often find themselves chained to narcissists. The narcissist's grandiosity feeds the empath's need to serve. The empath's self-abandonment feeds the narcissist's need to dominate. Each is drawn to the other by the gravity of unhealed wounds. This is not love, but a collision of shadows. To awaken is to recognize this dynamic, to admit that one's compassion was also a form of control, a way of ensuring attachment by offering endless sacrifice. Do not recoil from this truth. To see one's shadow is not to condemn oneself, but to become whole. When you see that your giving has sometimes been a mask for fear, you are not diminished, you are liberated. You can then give freely without hidden motives, without the unconscious need to bind others to you. This is the empath who heals, not one who abandons empathy, but one who purifies it, burns away its shadow until only the essence remains. And this purified empathy, fierce and clear, is what the narcissist cannot withstand, for the narcissist thrives on unconscious bargains. And when there are no bargains left, they are left naked in their own emptiness. Consider the archetype of the anima and the animus. Within each man lives the feminine soul image, the anima, and within each woman, the masculine counterpart, the animus. When unintegrated, these archetypes project themselves outward, binding us to others in patterns of longing and disappointment. The unhealed empath often projects their anima or animus onto the narcissist, seeing in them the promise of completion. The narcissist becomes the vessel for the empath's own unlived depths, appearing radiant and necessary, even as they devour. But when the empath heals, when they integrate their inner masculine and feminine, when they embrace the union of opposites within themselves, they no longer need to project completion outward. They no longer need the narcissist to reflect what they lack. They carry within themselves the marriage of anima and animus, and this inner union radiates as wholeness. It is this wholeness that terrifies the narcissist most, for the narcissist survives by becoming the screen for projection. They dazzle with their charm. They seduce with their intensity. They promise what the unconscious longs to see. But when you reclaim your projections, when you withdraw them from the narcissist and embrace the figures within your own soul, you shatter their illusion. They can no longer seduce you with borrowed light, for you carry your own. They can no longer bind you with false promises, for you have found the marriage of opposites within, and so they lose their power. They stand revealed as hollow, as fragile, as terrified as they truly are. Let me tell you a vision that came to a patient in a dream. She dreamt she was in a vast hall of statues, each representing a figure from her past parents, lovers, friends. Each statue demanded her devotion, pulling her to kneel, to pour her light into them. She obeyed until she reached the final statue, a towering figure cloaked in gold. When she knelt, she realized its face was empty, a mask with nothing behind it. Terrified, she tore the mask away, and behind it was her own reflection. In that moment, all the statues shattered into dust, and she stood alone, radiant with light. This dream reveals the truth of projection. All that you worship in others, all that you fear in others, is a mirror of what lies within. When you reclaim it, the false idols fall, and you discover your own divinity. This reclamation is the essence of individuation. It is the process by which you cease being a fragment, circling others, and become a whole center in yourself. And for the empath, individuation means no longer defining oneself by the needs of others. It means no longer existing only in relation to someone else's hunger. It means stepping into the radiant center of the self, where compassion flows, not from lack, but from fullness. In this state, you do not need to rescue, you do not need to control, you do not need to be indispensable. You simply are, and your presence itself becomes healing, because it carries no demand. This is why the empath who heals is invincible. They are free of the unconscious contracts upon which narcissistic power depends. The narcissist is terrified of wholeness. They may appear confident, even omnipotent, but beneath their grandiosity lies a fragmented self, a fragile child who has walled themselves off from pain by constructing a mask of superiority. They survive only by feeding on others' projections, by absorbing the light of those who have not yet reclaimed it. But when they meet the healed empath, they encounter a presence that does not project, that does not yield, that does not abandon itself. They face the unbearable mirror of their own emptiness. And this is why they fear you. Once you are healed, you represent the wholeness they denied themselves. You are the living proof that healing is possible, that the mask is unnecessary, that the self waits for all who dare to descend into the unconscious and return. But remember, the path of individuation is not only personal, it is also collective. Each empath who heals contributes to the healing of the collective psyche. For what is the narcissist but the symptom of a culture that worships image over essence, power over depth, consumption over creation? We live in an age of narcissism where the mask has become more real than the face, where the hunger for validation drives entire societies, and the empath, unhealed, becomes the perfect fuel for this culture, endlessly giving, endlessly sacrificing, endlessly consumed. But the empath who heals becomes a revolutionary force. They withdraw their energy from the machinery of exploitation. They refuse to be consumed. They radiate authenticity in a world of masks, and in doing so, they threaten the entire system of illusion. This is why your healing matters not only for yourself, but for the world. Each time you set a boundary, you challenge a culture that feeds on compliance. Each time you reclaim a projection, you weaken the machinery of seduction. Each time you choose wholeness over sacrifice, you become a beacon of what is possible. And though the narcissist may fear you, others will be drawn to your light, not because you give endlessly, but because you embody truth. This is the paradox. When you no longer need to rescue, you truly heal. When you no longer need to be needed, you become a presence that awakens others to their own strengths. And this, above all, is what the narcissist cannot bear. That your healing liberates not only you, but those around you. Do not imagine that this path will be without struggle. The unconscious resists change. The shadow will whisper its temptations. Old wounds will call you back. You will be tested again and again to see if you will kneel at the old altars. But each time you choose wholeness, each time you refuse to betray yourself, you strengthen the presence of the self within you. And soon the old chains will fall away, not with violence, but with quiet inevitability. You will look back on what once bound you, and you will wonder how it ever seemed so powerful. For the truth is that the narcissist power was never theirs. It was always yours, given away in unconsciousness. When you reclaim it, you discover that they never had it at all. And so I say to you, your task is not to fight the narcissist, not to hate them, not even to change them. Your task is to see, to awaken, to integrate. Your task is to reclaim what you projected, to embrace your shadow, to unite your anima and animus, to stand in the radiance of the self. And when you do, the narcissist becomes powerless before you. They cannot feed where there is no offering. They cannot seduce where there is no projection. They cannot dominate where there is no self-abandonment. They become like shadows at noon, insubstantial, unable to touch the one who walks in light. This is the final warning, but it is also the final promise. The empath who heals becomes the archetype of transformation, the alchemist who turns suffering into gold, the warrior who wields compassion as strength, the mystic who radiates the self. Such a one is feared by all who thrive on unconsciousness, not because they destroy, but because they awaken, and awakening, once begun, cannot be stopped. The narcissist's greatest fear is not you, but what you represent, the proof that their mask is unnecessary, that their emptiness can be faced, that their own healing is possible. But to see this would demand that they descend into their own abyss, and most will not dare. You dared, and for this you are feared, but also free. You must understand that the work of healing, of individuation, is not a solitary achievement meant only for your private relief. It is a ripple cast into the collective unconscious, where every act of integration affects the whole of humanity. Each empath who dares to face their shadow, who dares to step beyond the intoxicating pull of the narcissist, becomes a node of light in the darkness of the world. This light is not sentimental, not naive, not fragile. It is the light of consciousness which illuminates without asking permission, which burns away illusion simply by existing. And this, more than anything, is what makes the narcissist tremble, that your healing exposes the lie not only of their mask, but of the culture that gave birth to them. For the narcissist is not merely an individual phenomenon. They are the symptom of an age obsessed with appearances, with domination, with the endless hunger for recognition. Ours is a time of spectacle, where image outweighs essence, where the performance of success masks the absence of soul. In such a culture, the empath is exploited, celebrated for giving endlessly while being quietly consumed. The empath, without healing, becomes a servant of the collective narcissism, pouring themselves out for institutions, leaders, ideologies that care nothing for their soul. But the empath who heals withdraws their power from this machinery. They refuse to be devoured. They carry their essence intact, and in doing so, they threaten to unravel the spell that binds the masses. This is why I call this my final warning. If you do not heal, you will be consumed not only by the narcissist in your personal life, but by the collective narcissism of your age. You will give until you are dust, applauded for your virtue, even as your spirit fades. But if you heal, you will stand as a force that the culture itself cannot fully tolerate. You will no longer fit neatly into its expectations. You will be too sovereign to be manipulated, too awake to be seduced, too whole to be consumed. You will be, in a word, dangerous. Dangerous, not because you destroy, but because you reveal. When you walk into a room as a healed empath, the atmosphere changes. Those who live in illusion feel the discomfort of being seen. Those who live in masks feel the tremor of exposure. But those who are hungry for truth feel relief, as though a fresh wind has entered. For your presence itself becomes an archetype. The archetype of the one who has descended into the abyss and returned with vision. And people know it, even if they cannot name it. They feel it in the way you do not rush to rescue, in the way you listen without dissolving, in the way you speak with clarity that cuts through the fog. The narcissist senses it too, and they recoil, because your very being nullifies their strategy. The myths have always told of such figures. Orpheus descended into the underworld to bring back his beloved. Persephone was taken into the darkness and emerged as queen of both worlds. Christ descended into hell before rising again. These are not stories of others. They are mirrors of your journey. You, the empath, have descended again and again into the underworld of toxic entanglement, into the abyss of others' wounds, into the devouring jaws of narcissism. But now you are called not to remain there, not to be devoured endlessly, but to return. And in your return, you carry something that no one can take from you. The knowledge that you have faced the darkness and survived. This is the goal of individuation. In dreams, the healed empath often meets the figure of the self, not as a gentle presence, but as a radiant power. Sometimes it appears as a blazing sun. Sometimes as a great tree with roots deep in the underworld and branches stretching to the heavens. Sometimes as a figure clothed in both shadow and light, uniting opposites in one form. This is the destiny of the empath who heals to embody the self, to become the living bridge between conscious and unconscious, between shadow and light. And once you have tasted this wholeness, you will never again be fooled by the empty promises of the narcissist. For you will know what real power feels like, and It is not domination, but integration. Remember, the narcissist is not your enemy. They are a symbol, a living manifestation of the fragmented psyche that denies its own wound. To hate them is to fall into the same fragmentation. To pity them is to entangle yourself once more. To heal is simply to see them clearly, to withdraw your projections, to reclaim your power, to walk away if needed, without bitterness. For the narcissist cannot survive in the field of a healed empath. They will either flee to find another mirror or be forced, for the first time, to confront their own emptiness. And while few will choose that path, some might, and in that moment, your healing becomes contagious, for you are no longer a victim, but an initiator of transformation. I recall a vision that once came to me in a dreamlike state. I saw a vast battlefield strewn with broken masks. They lay shattered, empty shells, once worn by those who could not face themselves, and upon the field walked figures of light, not radiant with sentimental brightness, but with a steady fire of consciousness. Each carried in their eyes the knowledge of shadow. Each bore in their presence the integration of opposites, and wherever they walked, the masks dissolved, the illusions fell away, and truth emerged like grass breaking through stone. I tell you now, this vision is not fantasy. It is the future that awaits if enough empaths dare to heal. For the healed empath is not merely an individual. They are a herald of a new way of being, where wholeness replaces fragmentation, where truth replaces illusion. Do not think this path will make you invulnerable to pain. You will still feel, perhaps more deeply than ever, but you will no longer drown. You will still love, but your love will not enslave. You will still encounter shadows, but you will not mistake them for your own. And in this freedom, you will discover something greater than survival. You will discover creation. For the healed empath does not merely protect themselves. They bring forth new life. They write, they build, they teach, they parent, they create communities, they weave visions. Their energy is no longer siphoned away by narcissists. It is directed toward the shaping of a world more aligned with the self, and in this they fulfill their deepest destiny. So I say to you one final time, heal and you will become what the narcissist fears most. Not a destroyer, not an avenger, but a mirror. They cannot distort, a presence they cannot consume, a soul that shines with the wholeness of the self. You will terrify them not with violence, but with truth, not with hatred, but with clarity, not with rejection, but with indifference born of sovereignty. And beyond this fear, you will awaken others, you will shift the collective, you will embody the archetype of the wounded healer who has transmuted their wound into wisdom. Do not delay. The time is short, and the world hungers for such presences. Every day you remain bound in unconsciousness. The narcissist thrives. Every day you reclaim yourself. Their dominion weakens. You are called not merely to survive, not merely to escape, but to embody the fullness of what you are. Step into it, claim it, become it. For the empath who heals is the one who carries the torch into the darkness of the age, and in their light all falsehood trembles. This is my final warning and my final gift. The knowledge that the power you feared losing has always been yours, waiting for you to remember. And when you remember, when you rise, when you walk in the wholeness of the self, then you will see the truth of what I have spoken. The empath who heals becomes not only the narcissist's greatest fear, but humanity's greatest hope.